Hey guys, what's up? So today I'm going to be looking at a brand new plugin from Nembrini Audio, their Hughes and Kettner Puretone. So stay tuned. Okay guys, so this is a brand new plugin. Hughes and Kettner teamed up with Nembrini Audio. This is a fully licensed product. It is based on, well, not only just based on, it is basically a model of their Puretone amplifier that, to be honest, I don't know much about. And in fact, I had to do a bit of research to even understand really what this amp really did in the real world. But I can say, after kind of looking into it, watching some old videos, and kind of getting my head around what it is, it's a pretty simple, straightforward tube amp that, in so many words, kind of reminds me of an old Marshall, an old, like, kind of JMP or Plexi style amp, where you're very much using the volume as your main drive control. You're using a very simple bass, middle, and treble out setup, and there's even like an interesting function where you can completely cut out the tone stack and go straight from guitar to power amp, and it is, you know, saturation city once you start to drive the amp through the master volume. Okay, so let's just go ahead and I'm going to pull up the amp sim right now, and we're going to start going through kind of what this is and what it does. Alright, so I have it pulled up, and we're looking at what is essentially a very true to form Hughes and Kettner head shell with the full plexiglass looking translucent thing, all the blue lighting, everything. This looks very accurate to everything I've ever seen from Hughes and Kettner. This was sent to me by Tyler from the Amp Sim universe. You should go check out his channel, check out his live streams. And one of the things about this particular amp that I was kind of surprised, especially with Nembrini Audio, is this is the first amp sim I've ever had from Nembrini that has its own standalone desktop thing going on. If you know anything about Nembrini, most of their amp sims are contained within a live rig setup that you can kind of daisy chain all your stuff together. But this actually has its own standalone product that you can pull up on the desktop. Granted, I'm in a DAW right now, but within the desktop, you get not only the amp, but you get the cab section, which, for any Nembrini Audio product that you have ever used, they have a really well done cab section in all their models that they sell. And this is nothing new to Nembrini. The cab sections have always been really well done and built into the amp models. What is kind of new about this particular amp sim is now you have all of your post EQ effects built in to the module, and you have all of your pre effects built into the module. Whereas before, you would have to if you wanted to have an overdrive or some sort of compressor or even a noise gate, you had to kind of stack it in front of the actual amp sim to get that signal chain. Now it's all built into one. The other thing is, with the standalone version, you get a tuner built in. With the DAW version, there is no tuner that I can find. I still had to pull up the Nembrini Audio free tuner to tune the guitar. Doesn't really matter. Doesn't really bother me none. With the cab section, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different cab types. Obviously, there's some Hughes and Kettner cabs here. There are 212. There's an orange 12 V30 cab, 412 cab, which so far has been my favorite for high gain stuff on this amp. There looks like a VHT 412, a Vox 212, another Hughes and Kettner, a 412, which looks like it has 25 watt greenbacks, and then another Hughes and Kettner 412. Rock Driver 60s, those must be also maybe vintage 30 based, 60 watt speakers of some sort. Celestion, I would guess. And then back to the Hughes and Kettner 212. So either way, a lot of good assortment of cabs. Mics, we have the Dynamic 421 Sennheiser. We have the ever, present Shure SM57. The Royer ribbon mic, the 121. we have the AKG 414 condenser, and back to the 421. So, a handful of mics here, and you can obviously use two different mics and combine them into one impulse, or not really impulse, but one cab emulation sound. And you can turn up the volume of each mic independently to blend them together. There's also an ambient control here that gives you a little bit of room mic noise, a little bit of space in the mix, especially if you're doing more kind of crunchy, clean ambient tones. It's nice to have that little bit of breathing room. Through all of these, there's a small mixer here. This is actually one of my favorite features of Nembrini audio, the ability to solo and mute the individual microphones to kind of hear what they sound like independently, and then bring them back together. And you can also pan them. So if you're using this as a mix tool, there's actually quite a lot of power here. Beyond that, you have your ability to load your own impulse responses if you have some on hand, or you can fully bypass it and use your own impulse response loader if you have one that you really like. I think the Nembrini audio stuff is pretty well done, so I'm just going to roll with it. If we go to the amp itself, like I said, bass, middle, treble, volume control. There is this thing called Growl. Now what that does is if you turn it all the way to the right over here, you're going to completely omit the tone stack. You're going to go from the raw input of the guitar all the way over to the volume control on the power amp section. And so essentially what that does is give you like the unbridled DI of whatever guitar you're running. And in a lot of cases, that ends up being a bit more of a raw sound with a bit more like grit to it. I was interested to hear that. If you turn the Growl all the way back to the left, you're going to have the full tone stack, and then anywhere in between, you're kind of blending the two. I've kind of come to like either one or the other. The blending feature is cool. I haven't really found a way to use it that I particularly like, but there are some presets in here that utilize it that do sound pretty good. Beyond that, the volume control is how you get your gain. There is no gain on here. So if you turn the volume all the way up, you're going to get a bit more gain. You're going to get a bit more drive. Turn it all the way down, you're going to, turn it all the way down, it's going to be completely silent. But, as you turn it up, it's going to go from clean to crunch to full-on high gain. So there's something to that, whereas this is your main gain stage. So when you're trying to kind of pull some high gain tones out of this, I'm going to show you that really you're going to end up running the volume all the way up and using the outputs and the input controls on either side of the signal flow to really control your levels so you don't clip your track. Beyond that, we do have three built-in pedals. One is a noise gate, always good, especially if you're going to run that high gain stuff. I'm going to say right now, this is probably the best noise gate I've seen built into an actual plugin. The control that you get with not only the threshold, which is obviously a common metric that you use to determine when the gate kicks in, but this slow to fast response on here is really well attenuated. It's one of the better ones I've seen, and it has the added range thing, which I love the range thing, because if you go all the way to 100, obviously whenever that gate kicks in, it's going to drop the signal down to nothing. It's going to 100% drop the signal out. Now if you scale that back a little bit, you're able to get kind of a dip in the volume with the gate without it just completely cutting off all signal. So if you're just looking for a little bit of soft gating, it works really well. It helps it to where, especially if you're doing a lot of fast things that kind of bounce back and forth between fast articulate to like kind of slammy genty stuff, you're not going to suffer that like weird kind of loss in fidelity that you sometimes get with noise gates where they just cut off stuff a little bit too quick. So again, one of the best noise gates built into any plugin I've ever used. There's this thing called filters. Basically, if you are going to utilize the tight knob here, which the tight knob is basically almost like a low pass filter or a high pass filter of sorts, but not really. It more like focuses the mid range and kind of cuts out the low end as you go up. And then this harsh control allows you to attenuate some of those like really stringent high end frequencies that kind of poke through whenever you kind of process a distorted signal or any kind of signal like that If you have the tight knob all the way off, the harsh knob doesn't seem to really do much. It seems to be only really effective when you're using the tight knob. And then, you have a standard overdrive that seems very much built on something like a tube screamer, tone level drive. And if you run it like a tube screamer with the drive all the way down and the level all the way up, you're going to get that classic tube screamer kind of effect when you're, like to boost an amp. Otherwise, it's going to just be your standard, overdrive. Okay, so with that out of the way, that's your basic overview of all the features on this particular plugin. It's simple, straightforward. I'm running my PRS SE McCarty 594. I got my Corrigan Mark II and PAD pickups ready to go in this guy. Tuned to E standard for now, and let's just pull up a simple crunch tone on this amp and see what we got. All right, so I got their standard crunch tone pulled up, so let's see what that sounds like. Yeah, I mean, that sounds pretty standard, just, not too much, not too little, very good texture, a lot of ambience. Their presets in here are pretty limited. I will say that, of other companies, these, only having about what looks like maybe 12 or 15 presets, not a lot of depth there. Let's go to the bluesy one. Let's see if that's any different. Ooh, a bit louder. I'm gonna go to the neck pickup. Ooh, really boomy. Let me turn down that output just a tad. I'm gonna tap the coil. Yeah, I mean, pretty cool. Let's see if I can find something with a little bit more grit to it. This preset's called Heavy Drop D. I'm not in Drop D, but I guess I could be. Now, it's called Heavy Drop D. I think that when it comes to the term heavy, you get various degrees of what that really means. To me, I wouldn't really call this tone heavy, but when you're working with an amp that seems a little bit more old school and maybe a little bit more like Marshall-y, I guess that is kind of on the heavy side. With that said, because this is a more metal-focused channel, let me go to the preset that I made and how I was able to find kind of more my style of heavy. And so this is my preset called New Crunch, and this to me is more in the realm of heavy. So yeah, to me that's more of like a heavy, like metal type sound. If you go into my preset I made here, one of the things that's obvious is I scoop the mids just a little bit. Bass and treble are just straight up. Volume is all the way up. That's where I'm getting most of my drive. If you go over here, What I have is, oh, one thing you can do with these pedals too is you can switch the order. So I have the overdrive before the tight, and so with the overdrive, you know, tone is all the way up. I could probably scale that back just a tad actually. Level's all the way up. Drive is up by 1 just to give it a little bit extra. Noise gate, I have the threshold pretty low. I have the gate up a little bit fast, and the range is kind of in the middle. Not too bad. That one's for John Brown. Yeah, cool. The other thing that is key to kind of shaping the tone for something a little bit more heavy here, use this equalizer. It's kind of like a multi-band EQ. I don't think there's anything parametric going on here. I don't see anything like that. Instead of sliders, it is knobs. I have the mids shaped to where I have a little bit of a scoop in the low mids, kind of, you know, for -4 or yeah, -4, -5, slight dip in the mids, and then a little bit of a, is that really a dip? Why do I have a dip? I should have a little bit of a bump actually. Maybe that's why I'm thinking it's a little bit unforward sounding. A little bit of a bump and no bump there. I have my high pass filter, or my low pass filter I mean. Yeah, I'll keep it about 212, yeah. Yeah, that sounds better with that little bit of a bump at 1.6. And I really like these frequency values. I really like 1.6. Like, to me, 1.6 is actually one of the frequencies that I often do end up bumping up a little bit in most guitar mixes. 3.2 is kind of cool too, because 4 to me is one of those like more harsher frequencies. 3.2 makes a little bit more sense. 6.4 again, we're a little bit north of 6. When you get the frequencies right on, the round values like 4, 6, 8, 2, those aren't really that desirable of frequencies to me in my experience. I think these slightly augmented frequencies are a little bit better. But 800, 400, 200, I would prefer 250 and maybe 120. But, you know, these work enough for this, and I like them pretty well. I've also experimented with using spring reverb just to give a little bit more size or a little bit more space to the mix. Super subtle. If you bump the mix just a tiny bit, it gives that little bit of a slap back just so you have almost like in the room kind of effect. So with the cab section, I found that the orange 412 is my favorite for high gain on this. I actually found that the dynamic 421 is also a good fit for the type of mid-range that I like. Off access or not, they both sound good. Putting it off axis just kind of tempers some of that high-end kind of crunchiness. And the Ribbon 121, if you just listen to it soloed, it has such a low-end, like, you know, like girth to it. It's always like my favorite to mix. The 421 by itself, a little bit anemic, but you add them both together. Yeah, and so there are also clean tones here. Let me go to the ambient clean tone here. pretty crunchy still. I don't know, does this really ever clean up too much? Yeah, not really. I mean, I think this amp is just meant to be a little bit dirty all the time, which is fine for me. If I go back to my my new crunch tone, and I'll show you what the growl does. So right now I have the tone stack completely engaged. And if I turn the growl all the way up, and so now the tone stack's completely gone. Just unbridled tone coming straight from the pickups, all the impedance of whatever pickup you're running. So if you're running like a super hot pickup, like these aren't super hot, these are pretty medium. If you're running something super hot, you're gonna get the full throatiness of like, you know, something like a Duncan Distortion or an Invader or an active pickup with a lot of, you know, like the Seymour Duncan blackouts that seem to be very just, you know, over the top. I tend to like the tone stack to be engaged for high gain stuff here. I just like to have that control. If I go back to the filter here, so the tight filter, to me, unless you're running like super low tune stuff, and I'm going to pull out a 7-string here in a minute to show you what this really can benefit. Turn the harsh all the way down just so we have none of that being filtered out. The tight knob. Kind of like that cocked wah thing if you turn all the way up. And then that harsh knob if you engage that. The harsh knob filters out some of that really bitey, like super nasally tone that's going on with the tight knob being all the way up. It doesn't sound too bad. Kind of cuts out some of the saturation, some of the low end. I tend to like to run it just a little bit up. Yeah, pretty good. Anyway, I'm going to grab an extended range 7-string guitar just so we can hear what this sounds like with a little bit more low tune stuff, and then I'll let you guys go. Okay, so I got this LTD. It's one of these H1007Bs. It's got that kind of, I don't know what to call this shape. It's like a Strat, but like offset Strat. I got Fishman Fluence Moderns installed in here, and it's tuned to drop C with a low G on the 7th. And here's what this tone sounds like, you know, with this guitar. yeah, it does the thing. If I go back to that filter knob and I turn that tight up, it can get pretty tight. A little too much. Turn the overdrive down. Actually, no, I'm turning the overdrive up just a little bit more grit on here. And tight knob back maybe about halfway. Maybe turn the gate up all the way. Threshold up. That noise gate's really good, actually. Yeah, pretty cool. Anyway, that's the Nembrini Audio Hughes & Kettner Puretone. I'll put a link in the description down to the where you can get it, and you can go check it out. You can, I think there's a trial. You can free trial it. It's probably one of the better featured plugins that they have in terms of just updated tones and a little bit of an updated interface, and the fact you get a standalone with it. It can do a lot of stuff, but I will say the one caveat is that where I have it now for heavy tones is kind of the limit of the heaviness that it does. But with that filter control and with some of those added bells and whistles, you can get pretty gnarly, good, effective heavy tones. So anyway, that's my spiel. I'll see you guys later.